Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi Ketubot, 1 week at a time. This is our 12th lesson. We are getting near the end of the Masachat, another few more weeks. And today we're going to review Daf 77 through 84. I just wanted to wish everyone a Shana Tova. Hope Happy New Year. Hope everyone had a lovely Rosh Hashanah. So we're going to start with the Mishnah on the top of Daf 77. So last week we spoke about blemishes or issues that the husband might have with the wife. And here we're going to talk about the reverse, that if a man develops a defect or a blemish after they were married, so we'll see what happens to the couple. So the Mishnah tells us that we don't force him to divorce his wife because the Gemara seems to say that she doesn't really care. She's just happy to be married, which the Gemara is going to mention in a few minutes. Or Rabban Gamliel makes a distinction between, if it's a small defect, then there's no divorce. But if it's something major, so then we force him to divorce his wife. So that's the Mishnah. The Gemara tells us that there's a machloket when the defect developed. If it developed before the marriage and she accepted it, or maybe we're talking about it developing only after the marriage. And if that's the case, she can demand a divorce because it happened recently. Or if it happened beforehand, we could say that she might have thought that she could live with it, but then she realized that she can't live with it, and therefore she wants a divorce. The Gemara describes what is a major defect. If the husband became blinded, lost a hand, or a foot was shattered, and again, the law is that if it is a major defect, then they can force him to divorce his wife. The next Mishnah continues. If he has the following, so again here we're going to have a list of different things. So again, we can force him to divorce his wife. So if he develops boils, like shchin, like from the plague, right, of the boils, or this disease that's called polypus, which the Gemara is going to explain what it is, or if he has a very smelly profession, right? Think, maybe garbage collector. In the times of the Mishnah and the Gemara, it was a tanner, someone who tans hides. It's very smelly. And again, even if she said that she could handle it beforehand, meaning let's say this was his profession before they got married, but now she says she can't handle it anymore, then they can force him to divorce her. Again, the sages say that if she accepts it and she says, I don't mind if this is what he does, then there's no divorce, except for shchin, except for if he has boils, because apparently with these boils or this condition, having relations would aggravate the condition, and therefore they couldn't be married in a natural way, and therefore they need to get divorced. And then there's a story of a woman who was married to a tanner, and then he died, and she needed to do yibum, and the brother was also a tanner, and the Mishnah says that the woman can say, listen, for your brother who I loved, so I was fine being married to a tanner, but for you, it's not okay. And basically, they can do chalitza instead of yibum. So now the Gemara explains what's this polypus. It could be bad breath, some sort of odor from his mouth or from his nose, but it's so strong that we can force him to divorce his wife. The Gemara adds a few other professions that are also either smelly or dangerous, and we can force him to divorce his wife. Another case, if a man says, I don't want to support my wife, again, he is forced to divorce his wife with a ketubah, because again, what kind of marriage is this? And we've mentioned this last week. I think here the Gemara is being very forward thinking and trying to protect the woman and make sure that she's um, in an environment that's productive. Um, but again, right, we don't force him to support the wife because she doesn't want to be in that kind of a relationship. Um, there was a statement that you do force that you only force prohibited couples to divorce. And again, there's a machloket if you force a man to divorce his wife if they've been married for 10 years without children. Right, this is a very serious case. We know that a man is commanded to have children, and generally, a woman also wants to have children, but because after 10 years, it seems that they will not have children. There's a machloket if we need to force them to get divorced. Here, the Gemara then talks about different types of, different types of shchin, of these boils, and how relations are bad for them. And there's different types that are mentioned. Here we have a story of the death of Rabioshua ben Levy, and it's a very interesting story that God tells the angel of death to do whatever Rabioshua Halevi says. They were very close, so he says you have to listen to him. And Rabioshua ben Levi sees the angel of death coming for him, and he asks to see his place in the Garden of Eden. And he also wants the angel of death's knife. So he gives him the knife, and he takes him to his place, and excuse me. And when he sees the place, he actually jumps over the fence into the Garden of Eden, and he's allowed to stay. There's a whole discussion. Can he stay? Does he have to go? And he basically, when he jumped in, he said, I swear I'm never going back. And because he made that oath, so then he needed to stay, but he needed to return the knife to the angel of death, right? Because again, he can't kill anybody without his knife. And Eliyahu then, right, the prophet announces the arrival of Rabioshua ben Levi because he's such a miraculous, he's such a righteous man. And then there's another story of Rabbi Hanania bar Papa, who was a close friend of the angel of death. And when it's time for him to die, he asked him for 30 extra days so he can review his Torah. And then when he came back, he said to him, I also want to see my place in Gan Eden, and I also want your knife. But the angel says, no. I already fell for that trick once before. I'm not doing it again. And it seems that he does not end up jumping into the Garden of Eden, but he does go to the Garden of Eden when he dies. And and a pillar of fire appears when he dies. And again, it seems to be separating the righteous from the other people who didn't follow all of the Torah. And with that, we finish the 7th chapter. We are now going to start the 8th chapter. And now, Daf 78, we start with the Mishnah, where we're going to be discussing Nichsei Melog. We mentioned this before. Nichsei Melog is the property that the woman brings into a marriage, and it's written down in the Ketubot, and she retains all the rights to the property, and the husband can benefit from whatever produce is produced in that on that property, right? So the Gemara calls it peirot, the produce, right? Literally the fruit, but it doesn't mean that it has to be an orchard with fruit. Somebody we were learning, and someone said it could be that she owns an apartment building and she collects rent every month. So the rent would be called the peirot, right? The produce the income that the property is bringing in. Um, so the Mishnah on Daf 78 tells us that a woman inherits property. Let's say a woman inherited property before she was betrothed. Then, when she goes into the marriage, right, she basically has control of that property. She can sell it. Um, Sorry, if it's before she was betrothed. If she inherits it when she is betrothed, now there's a machloket. Beit Shammai say she can sell it, um, and Beit Hillel say she can't. But if she did sell it or give it away as a gift, it does work. So what are we discussing here? The idea is that on one hand, she retains the rights to the property, but on the other hand, the husband also has some rights to the property. So if they're sharing the rights to the property, maybe she doesn't have the ability to sell it. We would say out from under him. So that's really the machloket. Um, Rabbi Yehuda says that the sages asked why the husband doesn't acquire the rights to the entire property. Right? It's a machloket if he does after they're married. Right? Again, here they're just betrothed. So they agree that before marriage he does not acquire the rights, but now if she inherits the property after they're married, if she sells it, then the husband actually has a right to collect it from the people who bought it, right? Meaning she does not have the ability to sell it out from under him, as one would say. If she inherited it during her engagement, right, betrothal, and now they're married, so now she can sell it because she inherited it earlier. Um, if the husband knows about the property, then she shouldn't sell it. But if she does, then it doesn't work, right? It's invalid. If he doesn't know about the property, again, she shouldn't sell it. But if she does, the sale is valid. So that's the Mishnah. It's a lot of information. Let's go through the Gemara. So the Gemara says, if she inherits the property before she's betrothed, so then it's completely hers. After betrothal, so then it's a safek. We're not sure if it's hers or if it's her husband's, and therefore she shouldn't sell it. So some say that betrothal is the same as marriage, right? If it's after marriage, then for sure he has a right to it, and therefore she cannot sell it. But some say that no, if it's during betrothal, the husband doesn't have full rights to it, and therefore she could sell it. She shouldn't sell it, but if she does, she can. Second, okay. Um, all right. So in Usha, if you remember, Usha was where the Sanhedrin moved to up north in the Galil. So in Usha, they said that if she sold the property while the husband was alive and then she died, the husband can take it from the people who bought it, right? Because basically he inherits her when she dies. So our Mishnah says that if she's still alive, he can only take back the peirot, meaning the produce, whatever it produces. But if she died, he can even take back the property. Um, so again, here, what about here? The Gemara says that a woman wanted to keep. What happens if a woman wants to keep her property from her husband? Remember, we said he gets to eat the peirot, and he inherits her when she dies. So a woman decides she's gonna, be smart. So what does she do? She gave all of her property to her daughter, right? She wrote it in her daughter's name, and then the daughter didn't want to give it back. Right? Let's say they got divorced or the husband died, and then the woman went to the daughter and said, "Okay, give it back to me." And she's like, "No, it's mine." So on Daf 79, so Rav Nachman tears up the contract, meaning he says, this is not a real contract. She didn't really mean to give it to her daughter, and therefore he tears it up. How did he know it wasn't real? Because she gave away all of her property. Because she gave away all of the property, so then we know that it's not real. Okay. Um, there are other documents that are mentioned here on DAF 79. There's a document of agreement where they agree to acquire a property. So here, right, it seems to be like a gift that someone is giving somebody else, and it does work. Okay, the next Mishnah, we're going to continue with this concept of Nichsei Melog. So as I mentioned before, the land is hers, right? So the language in the Mishnah is the keren. Keren means the principal, right? So the property itself is hers. The peirot, right, the produce, are his. Right now, here the Mishnah is going to teach us that the husband needs to protect the keren for her, right? He can't just say, oh, this is your land. I'm not watering it. I'm not planting it. I'm not doing anything. He needs to protect the keren for his wife. So here the Mishnah tells us that she inherits, let's say she inherits money. Now, till now we've been discussing property. What if she inherits money? So here the Gemara says that the money is the keren, that's the principal. What does he do? He needs to take the money. Again, money is liquid. It doesn't last. So he needs to buy land with that money, and then he can eat the produce from that land. What if she inherits peirot, right? What if she inherits, right, apples from a tree, right? Not the tree and not the field, not the orchard, but the apples. So then the apples now become the keren, the principal. Then he needs to sell the apples, buy land, and then he can eat the fruit of the land. If she inherits, right now, if she inherits apples, but now they're attached on the tree, um, so now Rabbi Meir says we estimate their value, and again, he buys land and he gets the peirot, or he inherits the fruit, meaning again, she inherits apples that are attached to a tree. They weren't picked yet. So he inherits those apples. And if anything is on the floor or if it's detached, those are hers. And then he sells those picked apples, buys land, and he eats the fruit of that. Okay, Rabbi Shimon says if coming into the marriage she had attached fruit, meaning fruit that was still on the tree, then those go to the husband. But if they get divorced, then all the fruit that's on the trees go to the wife. Again, there's this idea of detached versus attached to the tree. Okay, the Gemara tells us that, and this is a good stock tip, that land is the best investment, right? Um, and houses are better. So land is the best. Now, let's say you don't have an option to buy land. So then the next best thing to do is to buy houses. Then the next thing to do is to buy palm trees. Those are the best trees. Here the Gemara tells us, again, speaking about the principle versus the produce, that a timber forest, right, a forest that's used for timber, so the timber is considered the produce, even though the timber is actually the tree. So it's important to understand. Also, there's a machloket about, let's say she brings animals into the marriage. So the offspring of those animals are the produce, right, the peirot of the principle, which was the animal itself. Um, Okay, right. So here he needs to make sure that there always is the principle, to make sure that the principle is always there, the keren for the wife, and that is very important. Okay, the next Mishnah tells us that, let's say she inherited old slaves. So then he again, old slaves means that they're not really useful, they don't do work. So then he needs to sell them. And then again, he takes the money, the husband takes the money, he buys land, and then he can eat the produce off the land. Or the Mishnah tells us that she could actually prevent him from selling these slaves. Again, it seems to be that there's a family connection, right? Let's say this was her her nursemaid, her nanny, right? And now they're older. She can prevent him from selling them. Let's say she inherits old grapes or an olive tree. Again, the husband sells them, buys land, or again, if it's something that is close, that is something that is important to her, she can prevent him from selling these items. Okay, so now the Gemara at the bottom of 79 tells us that if she inherited, right, again, let's say she inherits trees and not the land, right? Again, we started the conversation by talking about her inheriting land, but let's say she just inherits the trees. So then again, he needs to sell them to make sure that she'll always have land, right? So she sells the trees to buy land for her and for him to eat off of. The next Mishnah at the bottom of 79, if a husband invests in his wife's property, right? So let's say she brings in a field and the field is not in good condition. So let's say he puts in his own money and he puts in an irrigation system and he buys grain or seeds or trees. So now if he invested a lot and he used only a small amount of the produce, meaning he reaped some benefits but not a lot, or if he invests a little and got a lot out of it, either way, when they get divorced, he is not reimbursed, right? He can't say, I just put in $100,000 into your field, give that back to me because now we're getting divorced and it was your field. But if he invested whatever amount it is and he didn't benefit at all, then he can take an oath, right? He swears, and then he gets reimbursed for whatever he put in to the field. So again, it's important to understand if he doesn't benefit, so then he gets his money back. Why does he need to swear? Because we want to make sure nobody's cheating, right? So and we've said this before, and we'll say it more today. We take oaths very seriously, and someone, right? If someone wants to extract money from somebody else, they need to take, in certain situations, they need to take an oath to say, he owes me so and so amount of money, and he didn't pay, he didn't give me any money yet, and now give me the money. So that's what happens. Okay, so the Gemara tells us that even if he ate one dried fig, that kind of messes him up, and he does not get reimbursed for any investment that he made on her property. Again, we're talking about the Nichsei Melog, the property that she brings into the marriage. Daf 80 tells us again, even if he used the wood from the field, remember we said, as long as he's using something from the field, that's seen as produce, and then it's seen as he benefited from this relationship or interaction. If he invests in the property of his wife, who happens to be a minor, right? So now, if you remember, a minor whose father passed away, and her brothers, married her off. If you remember, she has the ability to do mi'un, right? She has the ability to say she doesn't want to be in this relationship. Therefore, the Gemara tells us on Daf 80 that if the husband invests in the property of his wife, who's a minor, no matter if he did get benefit or not, he is reimbursed, because we want to protect the woman, the girl, because we want to make sure that if he sees that he'll get reimbursed, he'll take care of her property. If he won't get reimbursed, then he's not going to take care of her property because any day she could wake up and say, I'm out of here. So, in order to protect her, the sages said that he will be reimbursed for whatever he puts into the property. So now we have a story of a husband and a wife. The woman um, inherits 400 zoos, right, in another city. And the husband says, oh, you know what? I'll go get it for you. The husband is not the brightest of husbands. And it turns out that he ends up spending 600 zoos in expenses in order to get the 400 zoos for his wife. Now it's not because he's being like it's not like he flew first class, but it seems that he made a booking on the ferry and then he forgot to get it and then he had to go again and then he didn't have a place to sleep. Anyway, he spends much more money than he was going to collect. And then on his way back, because he runs out of money, he used one zuz from the 400 that he went to pick up. And then when he gets back, he says to the wife, okay, here's your 400, but you owe me 600. And the rabbis say, no, she doesn't need to reimburse him because he benefited from her money that he went to pick up. However, the Gemara says, wait a minute, he used the keren, the actual money that he picked up, and not the peyrot. So he didn't really benefit from the peyrot, from the produce, and therefore he swears that he spent what he spent, right? He's not making it up, and then he gets reimbursed. Again, um, this is all, if they get divorced. What if his investment was more than the increase of value of the property? So the Gemara tells us that he only gets reimbursed up to the value of the property. Meaning, right, if he puts in $100,000 and now the field is worth, right, is worth $50,000, so he doesn't get reimbursed $100,000 because the field isn't even worth $100,000. And here now there's a discussion about if again, let's say the woman brings in a field and the husband hires sharecroppers to work the woman's field. Now they get divorced. So the Gemara asks, what happens to the sharecroppers? Right? Do they disappear because now the husband left? Or are they tied to the land and therefore they stay to work the land? So the Gemara teaches us that if the husband could have farmed the land by himself, let's say he was a farmer, so then when they get divorced, the sharecroppers leave with him because they're seen as an extension of him. But if he isn't a farmer, then they're connected to the land and then they stay with the wife with the land. Um, what about can the husband sell the rights to the fruits? Right? Again, we started our discussion with if she can sell her land. What about can he sell? Again, let's pretend the wife has an apple orchard. Can the husband, now let's say we say the husband has the rights to the apples, right? Not to the field and not to the trees, but to the apples. Can the husband sell the apples again when I think it's when they're still attached. I think they're still attached to the tree, but even if not, uh, the idea, so even if not, because the Gemara says, right, maybe he has the right, it's his, so he can do whatever he wants with them, or no, it's meant for the household, meaning he has the rights to the apples so that he brings the apples into the house and they all sit down and eat all the apples, not for him to, make money off of it. And there's a machloket if the sale works or not. Okay, next Mishnah. Now let's talk about a shomeret yavam, right? A woman was married, she didn't have children, the husband died, and now she's waiting to do yibum with the brother. Now, when she's waiting, she gets an inheritance. Does it go to him or does it go to her? So the Mishnah says it goes to her, right? Because remember, we learned in Masechet Yevamot, right, that there's a connection between her and the Yavam, the brother, but it's not strong enough to make it that he inherits her, right, already before they do Yibum. However, if she dies, now there's a machloket. Now, she dies before they did Yibum. So what happens? Beit Shammai say that the husband's inheritors, right, meaning the basically the brother, and the wife's inheritors, basically her father, or if she had children from another marriage, so they split her ktuva and this property. But Beit Hillel say that the husband's heirs get the ktuva because it's in their property, meaning they never paid it out. And her property, meaning the Nichsei Melog, go to her heirs. So again, there's like a division of the property. Let's say a husband died and he leaves cash, he leaves money. What do? We buy land with that money, and then the brother, right, the Yavam, eats the peirot, right? Again, that we're going to see that this land is attached to the woman's ktuva, so we have to be very careful with this property. If he left detached fruit, so then they can sell it and buy land. And again, the Yavam eats the fruit from that land. If the fruit is attached to the tree, we take the value of that and we buy land. Or no, the fruit that's attached to the tree belongs to the Yavam. But the detached fruit, whoever gets to them first can keep them, right? Either the wife or the Yavam. We're going to see this a few times in today's shiur. Let's say he marries the Yivama, right? They do Yibum. So her ktuva, right? We learned this before. Her ktuva comes from the original husband's property, right? So whatever he left, that goes to her, towards her ktuva. And therefore, the new husband, meaning the Yavam, cannot just say, here's 200 zuz, I'm leaving it on the table, you take it, and now I want to take the property, right? Rather, the property needs to remain untouched. It doesn't mean untouched, not taken care of, but cannot be sold by the Yavam unless they get divorced, right? And if they get divorced, she gets her ktuva and he gets the rest of the property. That's the next line, right? If the Yavam divorces her, she gets her ktuva, and then the Yavam keeps the rest of the money, right? We learned that the Yavam inherits the brother, right, because he comes in his place, so he gets to keep the rest. If he remarries her, then she only gets her ktuva, and that's going to come from the Yavam's property. Okay, so now the Gemara says, let's say the woman died, the Shomeret Yavam, before they did Yibum, who needs to bury her? So the Gemara on Daf 81 tells us that the one who got her ktuva is the one who buries her, right? You got her property, so you pay for her burial. So this is, right, the heirs of the husband, right, meaning the Yavam. So then the Gemara goes on to the Sotah, right, the woman who is suspected of, the woman who is suspected of an adulterous affair. She is brought to the temple to drink the bitter waters. So if she's a Sotah, if the husband died before she drinks the waters, so Beit Shammai say that she gets her ktuva and she doesn't drink, meaning even though he suspected her of having an affair, we don't know, and there's no witnesses, so therefore she gets her ktuva. Beit Hillel say either she drinks or she, either she drinks or she doesn't get her ketubah. And then the Mishnah says, the Gemara says, no, 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 because not she can't drink without the husband. We'll learn that in Masechet Sotah. If the husband died, she cannot drink the waters. Um, so basically, what Beit Hillel is saying that because she can't drink, she doesn't get her ketuvah, right? Because we're not sure if she had an affair or not. Meaning, if she didn't have an affair, she would get a ketuvah. If she did have an affair, then she would not get her ketuvah. So again, we have this uncertainty of whether or not she deserves her ketuvah. And here the Gemara has an important principle, which is that a document that is ready to be collected is as if it was already collected. What does that mean? That the ketuvah, because she has the ketuvah, right? Meaning again, before he dies, because she has the ketuvah, so it's seen as already in her property, even though she didn't get it yet. Meaning she didn't get the money yet, but because she could have gotten her money, it's seen as hers, and therefore the yavam does inherit the ketuvah from the wife. Um, Again, another story. Reuven died, leaving a wife to Shimon, his brother, right? And then Levi, another brother, comes and he wants, right? So Levi decides, I'm going to give a get to the woman so that it'll mess up Shimon, and then Shimon can't marry her, and then he can't get the property. So then Shimon, the brother, comes to Levi and says, wait, 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 don't mess this up. Let's make a deal, right? I'll do Yibum, and then we'll split the property, right, of Reuven, of our brother. We'll split it. So the Gemara tells us this doesn't work because the property is mortgaged to the wife's ketuvah. And unless she gets divorced, he can't do anything with that property. However, if she sells it, then it's a valid sale. So maybe that would be okay. The Gemara continues and tells us that the same thing works, right? Let's say Shimon owed money to Reuven, right? To Reuven, and then Reuven dies. So even though Shimon inherits him, again, they're two brothers. Even though he inherits him, he still needs, right? And he needs to take the money and buy land, and then Shimon can eat the fruit from that land. Okay, so now Daf 82 tells us this is important in terms of when somebody owes somebody money. So the Gemara teaches us that if A owes money to B and B owes money to C, so then A can give the money straight to C, right? So that works, that transference of owing. So right, this is again the same case of the two brothers who were going to split the property. And again, Levi was scared that he would cheat him. So Shimon offers to split it with him now. And then we said again, he can't do it because he doesn't own it yet, because he didn't marry the Yevamah yet. But if he marries the Yevamah and then splits the property with the brothers, that still doesn't work. Because as I mentioned, the property is mortgaged to her ktuva, right? It's mishu'abad, it's linked, and therefore he doesn't have the right to split it. But if he splits the property and then he does yibum, again, that also doesn't work because he doesn't have that ability till he divorces the wife. What is the Mishnah told us that if he remarries her, she's like a regular wife. What does that mean? That the Yavam can divorce her with a get, and then he can remarry her. Meaning, once he married her once he was permitted to marry her the first time, he's permitted to marry her again if they get divorced, right? She becomes his regular wife. Again, as we mentioned, the Yivamaz Ketuvah is from the first husband. However, if the first husband didn't leave any property, so then it does come from the second husband, right? We want to make sure that the woman always has a ketuvah that is going to protect her. We said that the man can't put money on the table and tell his wife, right, this is your ketuvah, and then I'm going to take the rest of the property. Because again, a regular ketuvah says in the language of the ketuvah that anything that the husband sells is mishu'abad. It's linked to her ketuvah, and therefore she can go collect it if, let's say, he dies or if they get divorced. She gets that property. But here the avam doesn't have that kind of ketuvah, so we want to make sure that she's protected with the original husband's property. Okay, right. So they used to write, right, again, 200 or 100 zuz in the ketuvah, but then the women wanted to see the cash, right? They said, right before they got divorced, like when they got married, they'd say, okay, take the 200 zuz, put it in a bank account. I want to make sure that it's there. And what would happen? Men who didn't have the money, then the women didn't want to marry them because they were afraid that they wouldn't have the money for the ketuvah. So the Chachamim wrote in the ketuvah that all the property that's owned by the husband is a guarantee for the ketuvah, and then they married, right? Then that made the wife feel better, and then they would get married. Okay. Again, there was this similar idea of a woman who was nervous that the heirs would hide the money. So again, the Chachamim, the sages, said that you need to leave the value of the ketuvah in the father's house, right? In her father's house, because we want to make sure that that money is there and it doesn't get squandered. Or maybe we leave it in the father-in-law's house, and therefore it's available, excuse me, it's available, but it's again not easy for her to get divorced. And therefore, after that, that wasn't so practical, and therefore they decreed that all his property is tied to the ketuvah, and that worked well. And with that, we finished the 8th chapter. Okay, 2 more dapim. Next, Mishnah on Daf 83. A second. Okay. Um, all right. A man writes. A man writes down. Again, a husband. He writes, "I have nothing to do with your property," meaning I don't want to get any benefit from your property, meaning his wife's property. The Mishnah tells us he can still eat the peirot because again, that's his. It's not hers, and he inherits her if she dies. If he writes it, so the question is, why does he write it? So he wants to be nice and he wants to give her the ability to sell her property or to give it away, right? Again, the Nichsei Melog. So he can say, no, I don't have any right to it. Sorry. And therefore, she could sell it if she wanted. What if he writes, I don't have any rights to your property and the peirot, right? And the produce. So then he cannot eat the produce, but he still inherits her when she dies. Rabbi Huda says he always gets the what's called in Hebrew peirei peirot, meaning the fruit of the fruit, right? So let's say she has an apple orchard. If he sells the apples, and then, right, let's say buys another field and that produces something else, that he can always have benefit from, unless he specifies, I'm not going to have the peri, and then he could also write in your lifetime or after you die, then he also doesn't inherit her. Or, says the Mishnah, he still inherits her because this is a biblical commandment, right? That a husband inherits his wife, and you cannot negate a biblical law. And therefore, even if he wrote it, he still does. He still inherits her. Okay, the Gemara now says, let's say he wrote all of this before they got married. Therefore, he can stipulate that he doesn't want to inherit her because he's not the inheritor yet till they get married. But once they get married, it's different, right? He's her partner already, and therefore he automatically inherits her. It doesn't matter what he says. Um, the Gemara says that it's better for the husband to have the rights to the peirot now, to the produce now, than have the ability to sell the field later, right? So the Gemara is kind of again giving investment tips and what is the best thing for the husband to do. Okay, so again, we said if he writes, I don't want to have any I don't want to have any benefit from the fruit of the fruit, like forever. So then he gets nothing. And the law is that if he said, I don't want to have benefit from you when you're alive or dead, he does still inherit his wife. Again, because we said you cannot stipulate against the Torah. Daf 84 says that that is the law, but that's not the reason, right? And it tries different attempts at reasons of what this could be. And we say, right, maybe him inheriting her is biblical, maybe it's only rabbinic, but if it's rabbinic, the sages made it very strong, and that's why he inherits her no matter what. Okay, we're at the top of Daf 84. The Gemara tells us that a husband needs to return property he inherited from his wife at Yovel. So let's just understand what the Yovel is. We understand Shemitah, right? This past year, right? Today is the third day of the new year that is not Shemitah, right? So we are on the first year now of the new cycle. The Torah tells us that after 7 cycles of Shemitah, right, that's 7 times 7, that's 49. Year 50 is called the Jubilee year, the Shnat Yovel. And on Yovel, what happens? Any property that was sold, loaned, gifted, goes back to its original ancestral owners. And the idea here is that, business is great and the Torah is pro-capitalism, but at a certain point, we want to make sure that it doesn't get out of control. And therefore, there are years of, I don't want to call it social justice, but almost more of a socialist financial system where everything goes back to its original owners. And here, the Gemara is telling us that if the husband inherited his wife, so that's great, but at the year of the Yovel, it goes back to her family's, original ownership. And they need to pay him for whatever the value was, whether it's the upkeep or the value of the field. And that seems to not prove that it's rabbinic. Maybe it still is biblical in origin. And the Gemara says, no, maybe we're discussing a case where a woman inherited, the husband inherited the wife's family's graveyard. Again, this is what he inherited, but it's not really fair to the family. It's not really nice to the family, and therefore that goes back to the family. Okay, last Mishnah for today. If a person died and now he leaves a whole bunch of people that want his money, right? It's like a good movie, right? So, or a bad movie, I don't know, right? So he leaves a wife, right? So she's supposed to inherit him. He leaves a creditor, meaning he owes money to somebody, right? He took out a loan and now the loan shark comes knocking on the door. And he leaves children, right? So all of these people are meant to inherit or get the money. So what happens? So it's a machloket who gets what. Um, so he also has, let's say, a deposit or a loan in somebody else's house, right? Meaning somebody else has his property. So the Mishnah tells us that you give the weakest person or the poorest person the loan that he had, or you give it to the heirs because they inherit the father without having to take an oath, meaning it goes straight to the heirs. And here there's a very interesting line. Rabbi Akiva says, "Ein merachmin bedin." Right? There's no mercy in law. Maybe we could say in the letter of the law, right? Like we have the idea of blind justice, meaning the inheritors, the children, need to inherit the land. And, even if the poor, he owes money to this poor man, it's not fair to take it away from the inheritors, the children. What if he left produce on the ground, meaning detached produce? Whoever gets there first can take it, either the wife or the creditor. But what if they take too much? So then all the extra goes to the weakest one, or, as we said, no, it goes to the heirs. So the Gemara says that it's important to recognize that it's the same thing whether it's a loan or collateral. Either way, we're going to figure out who gets what. And here the Gemara asks, what does it mean, the weakest person? It seems that that's the creditor, because again, he can collect from fewer people. Or maybe the weakest person is the wife, because she can't go around chasing people to get back his property. Or maybe, again, because of the Gemara calls it chen, right? Chen means grace. Right, again, the husband gave her the ketubah in order to protect her, not to mess her up. And since we discussed like whoever gets there first, the Gemara discusses seizing a property, right? So seizing, if you seize something while he was still alive, then that person can come and take it. He can keep it after the husband dies. But now the Gemara clarifies that. What do we mean? Let's say you have produce and it's in a public domain, so then you can seize that. But if it's in a private domain, you can't seize that. It's not yours to take. Um, and here the Gemara ends by telling us that in general, the law goes according to Rabbi Akiva. And here it seems that they go according to Rabbi Tarfon. How could that be? So maybe he made a mistake, so he has to change it. Or maybe if Rabbi Akiva argues with his teacher, Rabbi Tarfon, so in that case, Rabbi Tarfon wins and not Rabbi Akiva. And the daf 80, today's daf 84, ends with stories about heirs and creditors, and they all go and grab inheritance, and then there are different opinions of who gets to keep what. And there are a few stories about the seizures of, again, taking, who takes what and who gets to keep what. Okay, with that, I want to wish everybody a Shana Tova. There is a new schedule for the next month. It's a little complicated, our classes. So it's on the website when our classes are going to be. So next week, our class is going to be Thursday night, right? Because Wednesday night is the end of Yom Kippur, so we're not going to do that, and it'll be still Yom Kippur for everyone outside of Israel. So our next class will be next Thursday, and then over Sukkot, our class is going to be on Wednesday, and then the following week it's going to be on Thursday. So it's a little complicated, but I will send out emails, and it's also on the Web Yeshiva website. You can see when our next classes are. But I want to take this opportunity to wish everyone a happy new year, a Gmar Chatima Tova. You should have, first of all, for those of you still fasting, you should have a meaningful fast. Today is Tzom Gedalia, which we did learn about in the past. And also wishing everyone a very meaningful Yom Kippur next week on the Tuesday night and Wednesday. So we have a lot of celebrating to do. And with that, it's definitely a challenge to keep up with Daf Yomi. So those of you, keep it up and stick to it. Be'ezrat Hashem, we will get through it together. And really wishing everyone a Gmar Chatima Tova. Have a great
Same to you.
week.
Gemar Tov.
Thank you. Thank you. And a Shana Tova and a Shabbat Shalom, which is in a few days, if you can believe it.
I believe. Okay. Thank you.